It feels like just yesterday that we witnessed the climactic final fight between the Avengers and Thanos that ended with Tony Stark proving Captain America wrong and making the sacrifice play to save the day. It's a moment that will be seared in our heads forever, seeing Iron Man utter his last line and snapping his fingers. But we do have to ask the big question, just how in the heck was Stark able to wield the gauntlet without immediately exploding into a million pieces? We think that there's actually a big reason for this, and it goes back to the very first Iron Man movie. Special shout out to Redditor Wolverine Kazari 93 for this fun theory, and let's get into it right now. If there's one thing we know about Infinity Stones, it's that they're incredibly dangerous and should not be trifled with. If you're at home and you discover a weird glowing cube behind that weird wall with the Viking carvings in your attic, don't go playing around with it. You might just become Red Skulled, which is a word we made up to describe when someone gets trapped on Vormir for eternity as a weird space ghost. Or remember the Collector's poor, overworked helper? She tried to steal the Power Stone away to use against her cruel master, and as Peter Quill might say, the results looked like a Jackson Pollock painting. The point is, they're pretty powerful pieces of colorful space rocks. Like, we really can't underestimate how powerful these stones are. We're told through some wonderful exposition that 6 singularities existed before the creation of the universe, and then when the Big Bang happened, these singularities were formed into 6 conveniently colored stones representing space, time, reality, mind, power, and soul. So yeah, they're kind of a big deal, and almost all of our heroes have fought over them at some point in time, and only beings with immense strength could handle these stones without popping like grapes. Look at it this way, Peter Quill was half celestial, and he almost burned up instantly if his friends didn't grab onto him. Thanos was touted by Squidward as one of the only beings strong enough to wield the stones, and that proved to be true. Not only did Thanos wield all of the stones successfully, he also used the stone's immense power to snap away half the life in all the universe while having a massive axe buried in his chest. And the Mad Titan still survived the encounter and then went off to become Farmer Thanos. Then somehow he was able to have the strength to snap his fingers again to destroy the stones completely. And seeing him in the opening section of Avengers, it's clear the toll it took on him. Even when the Hulk stepped up to snap everyone back into existence, he made it a point to say he could only do it because of the immense gamma radiation surrounding the stones and their homemade gauntlet. He says that this is what he was basically made for. Unfortunately, he wasn't all right after this because his right arm was horribly disfigured. Huh? Get it? All right? Okay. Moving on. All of this is to say that anyone wielding the stones needs to be super powerful. So here's our big question. How in the heck did Tony Stark not only get to wield the gauntlet with all the stones and get to see a cool line before he snapped his fingers, but also walked around a little bit afterwards before he moved on to that great big iron heap in the sky? He's just a normal human being. He's not a half celestial, a giant purple people eater, or a humongous green former space gladiator. No, he's just your average genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist whose knees are probably starting to get a little bit weak due to arthritis. He's just a fleshy normal meat sack, and yet he was able to wield the gauntlet and the stones better than anyone. How does that make any sense at all? We actually think that there's a better explanation for how Tony Stark was composed enough to deliver the best line in any MCU movie and save the day. To truly understand how Tony Stark was able to use the gauntlet and the stones, we have to go back to an earlier time before Thanos, before time travel, before mischievous demigods, before rogue artificial intelligence robots, and even before Chris Hemsworth's bleached eyebrows. No, we have to go back to the movie that started it all, 2008's Iron Man. If Iron Man wasn't such a massive success, who knows where we would be today? Would there even be an MCU to write CBR videos about? We don't even want to consider that possibility. Thankfully, Iron Man was a huge critical and commercial success and set the bar for a new standard in superhero storytelling. It's Robert Downey Jr.'s game-changing performance as Stark that really sells the movie by not only being the snarky, cocky, arrogant, egomaniac we know he is, but also seeing how he cares for the people around him. That's the most apparent in his scenes with Ho Yinsen. Yinsen was Stark's fellow captive in the cave where he was kidnapped, and the two were instructed to build a missile for the Ten Rings terrorist organization. Obviously, they didn't do that, and instead built Tony's first Iron Man suit that he used to break out, and the rest, as we say, was history. Unfortunately, Yinsen didn't survive the escape, instead sacrificing himself so Tony could make it out. Can this man stop saving Tony's life for 5 seconds and think about himself? He was the one who saved Tony's life when he was brought to the cave with shrapnel in his heart by creating that prototype version of the Arc Reactor that hooked up to a car battery. Again, thanks to Redditor Wolverine Kazuri93 for pointing this out, but in a conversation between Yinsen and Stark, Yinsen comments how the Arc Reactor could run his heart for 50 lifetimes, to which Tony responds with, yeah, or something big for 15 minutes. So the theory is that Tony used up a lot of Arc Reactor juice to wield the Infinity Gauntlet and the stones at the end of Endgame. Logically, Tony should have turned to tiny specks of mush when he touched the gauntlet, but where's the cinematic fun in that? It would have been a totally depressing end, and of course, we had to have a nice heroic moment for our favorite characters, so that's why we like this theory. It gives a pretty good reason for why a normal human being was able to do what he did, and it provides a nice callback to Iron Man's original creation. There's a reason why Endgame didn't have a standard post-credit scene and instead had the sound of a hammer banging on metal, as it was supposed to be a reference to Iron Man creating his very first suit with Yinsen. Endgame closed the door on Tony Stark's story, so it would make sense for his final act to be a reference to something he said in the very first movie. And having Tony Stark use the Arc Reactor to increase his strength enough to save the day brings the entire story full circle, as what was once a necessary component in keeping Tony alive suddenly became the key to saving the entire universe. Because as much as we like to say that Tony Stark was able to wield the gauntlet because his willpower was the strongest out of everyone there, something about that just rings a little hollow and cheap to us. By saying his Arc Reactor pumped enough juice through his suit and through Tony's body for him to remind Thanos just what his name is before snapping his fingers seems like the logical and scientific explanation. And of course, we are using the term scientific a little liberally, as we're literally talking about magic space rocks here. For the longest time, Tony Stark knew a larger threat was coming to Earth. He was haunted by it ever since seeing what was on the other side of that portal in the first Avengers. It almost overwhelmed him mentally in Iron Man 3 and caused him to create Ultron to protect the planet in Avengers Age of Ultron. But what if that sinking feeling he had about the Mad Titan's arrival stemmed from something more than just wanting to protect the Earth? What if he knew, deep down, buried beneath all his bravado and one-liners, that he would have to die in order to save everyone in the universe? It was the moment the whole MCU had been leading up to, and it was all because of Tony's Arc Reactor that he was able to complete the mission and stop Thanos for good. But there's something else you gotta remember. This was the Arc Reactor from way back in 2008's Iron Man. It was still in its primitive state when it was built in a cave, and Peter Parker was still being potty trained probably halfway around the world. Tony Stark went from literally building a suit out of metal to eventually having the suit form around him with the help of nanotechnology. If Tony Stark had survived Endgame, we sort of expected in another few years for the suit to materialize out of thin air and be nearly indestructible. If the suits could come that far in such a short amount of time, then we are more than willing to buy that the Arc Reactor was able to fuel Tony's suit and his body just enough to give him power to wield the gauntlet and snap his fingers without screaming in pain. There's still a part of us that wants to believe that Tony Stark handled the Infinity Gauntlet because he's Iron Man. Thanos was the ultimate threat to his friends and family, and Tony wasn't going to let some grimace-looking purple Teletubby come to his planet and win again. The immense power of the stones is vast, but Tony Stark's determination to save the day just might be stronger. The suit and the Arc Reactor might have taken the brunt of power to give Tony enough time to do what needed to be done, but we also think a small sliver of it was Tony's own steely will. It's what made Iron Man such a great character. His body might be human and fleshy, but his heart was made of solid iron, both mentally and sorta literally. He just needed a super suit to channel all of his willpower into, and that's exactly what his armor did while fighting Thanos. The question people have asked Tony is if he's just a guy in a suit of armor or if he's a real hero. Although Captain America criticized him in the first Avengers about not making the sacrifice play, Iron Man still proved Cap wrong by ending Thanos at the cost of his own life. It's what a true hero would do, and we're thankful that Tony kept amping up his power levels for the Arc Reactor over the years to get it ready for the most powerful surge in all the galaxy. We miss you 3000, Tony Stark. We're proud of everything you've done, and even if it wasn't 100% you holding the stones and rather your suit's power level stopping it from going directly to your body, it was still you that made the suit that stopped the armor, so basically, it's the same thing. His suits are truly amazing, and if that's the last big act we get to see from Iron Man in the MCU, it was a very high note to end on. Well, that's our theory for today. What do you think? Do you think the Arc Reactor helped Tony get the job done, or should he have perished when the stones wrapped around his gauntlet? Be sure to let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more awesome MCU content. As always, thanks for watching.